Welcome to the February 18th, 2021 meeting of the City of Raleigh Appearance Commission. My name is Corey Bates and I'm chair of the commission. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are conducting this meeting using a remote electronic platform, and I'd ask for your patience today as we proceed. There may be slight delays as we transition between speakers, participants, and presentations. The Commission is charged to provide guidance, advice, and recommendations regarding the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the City of Raleigh. The members of the Commission represent a varied field of expertise and interest in the quality of design in Raleigh. It looks like we have 8 Commission members, so it looks like we do have a quorum. I would ask that if there are any Commission members that have to recuse themselves tonight, are there any that we're aware of? Okay, being none, I'd like to go ahead and ask staff member Carter Pettibone to briefly explain for the participants how we will be conducting today's meeting.
Thank you. I'm Carter Pettibone with the Raleigh Planning and Development Department. Today's meeting will proceed very similar to a regular meeting with a few minor adjustments. At any time a participant has issues with the technology, please send a message to the moderator. Aaron Morton is moderating this meeting. The chat function has been disabled for this meeting for all participants and the commission members, except for the ability to message the moderator if you have technical difficulties. For each administrative alternate case, a city staff member will provide a brief introduction and presentation. The applicant will then be acknowledged and present their case and have 10 to 15 minutes to do so. Speakers for the applicant are asked to provide their name and address for the record. Following the presentation, the commission members will be given an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant and staff. The commission will then hear from any other participants who would like to speak on the request. I don't believe we have anyone other than the applicants here tonight to present. When all comments from the applicant, staff, and other participants are complete, the commission chair will bring the item back to the table for deliberation. Commission members will then deliberate on the item and review the findings listed in the applicable section of the UDO. And following deliberation, the chair will ask for a motion, which will take the form of a recommendation to the planning director for action on the request. The motion can be a recommendation for approval, approval with conditions, or denial. The commission may also vote to defer a case to the next regular meeting. This is typically in order to receive additional information. The commission will then vote on the request. As a reminder to the commissioners, if you do turn your camera off and you'd like to speak, please identify yourself or turn your camera back on. I'm going to turn it back over to Corey to conduct the reviews. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Carter. Let me see here. So I will go ahead and let's call case number AAD 3-21, 1010 St. Albans Drive. We have several participants signed up to speak on this case tonight, but I think Rob is going to present. Well, let's go ahead and hear from Lee Stevens for a staff presentation first, if you don't mind, Lee.
Great, thank you, Chair. So 1010 St. Albans Drive is here to request 2 administrative alternates, one for transparency and one for building massing. I'm going to present them together, starting with transparency. The transparency requirements are intended to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades for both pedestrians and building occupants and minimize blank wall areas. For this particular case, the applicant is proposing to build the first phase of an office complex, starting with a 12-story building on a 4.15-acre site along St. Albans, zone commercial, mixed use, 20 stories, conditional use. The applicant is requesting an alternate to the transparency requirements for the northern street fronting ground floor elevation along A Street. There'll be plans to show you where that is in a moment. As the building is categorized as a mixed-use type building, 50% transparency is required on all public-facing streets, with 50% of the required transparency to be located between 3 feet and 8 feet on the building facade. Glass must be 80% transparent with no more than 15% external reflectance. In this case, the amount of glass complies with the standard, but the level of transparency is 76% rather than the 80% that we require. But the external reflectance is only 12% along A Street. The ground floor on the building uses aluminum wrapped columns to break up the facade and a canopy cover for added visual interest. There will also be a dining area and open amenity area along the ground floor. The findings for this case that need to be met are, one, that the approved alternate meets the intent of the transparency requirements, that it conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans, and that the street-facing building facade utilizes other architectural treatments to create visual interest to offset the reduction in transparency. All right, moving on to building massing. The intent of the building massing regulations is to manage the impact of tall buildings located near the public right-of-way. Step-backs are intended to provide access to light and air at street level, mitigating wind impacts to produce a consistent street wall and visually reduce the perceived scale of a building to avoid a canyon effect. So the 12-story office building here offers no step-backs as we require along the northern facade facing Street A, but the facade is angled to provide movement and differentiation to the shear wall and provide more light and air to the street. The angle of the facade creates an increased setback along the northwest corner, creating space for an amenity area with seating and landscaping. The base is differentiated by columns, storefront glass, and a canopy. And now I'd like to turn it over to Rob Rule to present on behalf of the applicant.
Great, thanks.
Unless, of course, there are questions. I apologize.
No worries. Are there any questions from the commission members or staff at this time? Being none, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, great, Corey. All right, thanks a lot, everyone. My name is Rob Rule. I'm a designer and architect with Rule, Joy, Trammell, Rubio Architecture in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'll take the next 10 or 15 minutes, like Corey said, to describe this project to you in terms of the things that we're here to discuss tonight. So I'd like to start with the site plan, which is on the screen right now. And I'll point your attention to just the overall context of the plan, which I think if you may or may not have seen some of the things going on around. And of course, there's the existing building to the east, the One Ren Center that somebody had their icon in a second. One Ren is just to the east. It's an existing office building. MTX1 is a new 12-story office building that you see in the colored portion of the rendering in the middle of the drawing there. To the north, there is a development, a master plan development in various stages of design and permitting and construction imminent on some of the infrastructure that would include different scales of residential homes, housing, and some park areas with some supplemental retail and so forth. There is a plan for a second office building, a second 12-story office building next to this MTX1 to the west that you can see actually ghosted in on the plan. And then to the south of this, both of the buildings is the parking structure that would be built, phase one and phase two as the second building comes online. Between the two office buildings is a motor court, which provides a public-private type of space that is meant to mingle cars and pedestrians very nicely, very calmly. There's traffic measures in place with the way the space is shaped so that there's a lot of opportunity there for people to be in that space, because we have some conferencing space just to the south of the motor court that's a part of this project that has breakout space on the ground level. So there's opportunities for people to gather there, and there would be the normal furnishings that go along with that at that point, as well as on the second floor of that same area, there would be an outdoor terrace that comes off of the conference rooms above. And I should say it's retail below and conference above. And so there's breakout space on two different levels right there. As you move around to the right of the motor court, it's in the east of the motor court, is the main entry. And that's where the lobby is in the light yellow color. The parking deck would actually, most everybody would come from the parking through that area to the office building. They would pass an outdoor work area space, a small pocket park, if you will, that's labeled on the plan, and get into the office lobby space. And then they would come around into the main building circulation from there. And then in the darker tan area is the retail space that basically, for all intents and purposes, on every publicly viewed side of this project, there's active space on every street front with floor-to-ceiling glass. In the case where the lobby is, it's 30 feet tall. So you'll also notice on this plan that the building is not a simple rectangle. The building has bends in it, it has notches in it, and those are very important areas that we are creating for outdoor gathering spaces that the one on the far right, for instance, off the retail, that can become an outdoor dining space related to the retail that we've added there. And then all along the northern frontage, that you can see there, there's actually a reset. The glass is recessed behind the columns. We've got exposed columns there. They're nicely wrapped in architectural pre-finished metal finishes, and there would be cover there, so there could be some cafe tables and chairs and seating and lighting and all the things that you like to have along a nice street environment with a wide sidewalk that you see there. And then as you come back over to the office lobby, you can see the big bend that we have with the glass line pulled back, creating an outdoor space that's in the dark gray area. But the idea is that the indoor and outdoor space are blended here. In fact, the glass is so transparent here, we want this to feel like there's the indoor and outdoor are one. And as you drive up from the motor court, you can actually see right into the lobby, and you'll see that curve there at the core element. That's going to be something pretty special. You've probably seen the renderings. We're making this a very sculptural, wonderful element, especially in the evening, but in the mornings when people arrive, it's going to be a really well lit space that's going to be very transparent and very exciting. A lot of energy and lots of people moving through from the parking deck all around that element every day, in and out. A lot of movement kind of going through there, which is going to be great. So that's the site. So if we want to move to the next slide, there's a elevation we can look at, and even some renderings. And you can flip through those as you would like. Maybe the elevation would be a good point to start if you want to zoom in on that. What I'll talk about is the building itself is a very sculptural composition. Although it's done in a very untraditional way, it does have a base, middle, and a top. You can see the base. The base is very clear. We've recessed the first floor glass, as I mentioned. You saw that in the plan. You see the expressed columns. You see that there's some are 1 story, some are 2 stories. You see the canopy. There's a lot of visual interest with shadowing and with depth at the base. So, and as it comes around the motor court, you can see that 2-story space with the canopy, with the terrace that sits above it, where the conference space is on the right-hand side of this drawing. So lots of interest. Lots of articulation, shadow lines, materiality with metal and glass, and there's even a little bit of a stone base you can't quite see here, but at the very bottom couple feet, there's actually really nice, beautiful granite down there. So there's a lot of rich materials, and it does have a base. Then of course the middle it's got fairly conventional components with a combination of glass curtain wall on the right portion, and then also glass window wall with precast horizontal banding, but done in a very unconventional way as the building undulates as it moves up. It bends vertically the same way that you saw it bend horizontally in plan, but it has vertical bends on multiple sides of the building. And then the top is also very unconventional as well, but it does have a top. It's not your conventional cornice or top hat, but it does reach up, and the top floor is recessed. On the right-hand side, there's a dramatic inset area creating an outdoor, essentially not a rooftop terrace, but it's the top floor terrace, kind of like a rooftop terrace. But that's supported by shifting the building, letting the building move out on the 2 floors below that, and shifting off the grid, if you will, and becoming something so significant it becomes what your eye's drawn to. And that elevates your eye from the base, the middle, and then your eye arrives at the top. So that's the way we kind of see that happening there. So obviously the massing of the building. Please do flip through these at your leisure, these renderings. But obviously the massing was conceived for this project without the UDO prescribed step back that was mentioned along the northern face. The only place where it's required would be along the northern face, which is the left-hand side of the view we're seeing right there. But what I would tell you is that I am confident that the design meets the intent of all of the administrative alternate findings. And most notably, I would contend that the building does not degrade the pedestrian comfort level at the ground level in terms of wind and sunlight, which are the 2 criteria that are mentioned in the UDO. And the reason I say that is we've actually studied the effect of these bent building planes, both in the vertical and the horizontal direction, and the effect they have on wind and sunlight. We've looked at solar studies, and we've looked at actually wind tunnel testing. We've compared a building like this with the bent planes compared to a rectangular footprint of what the UDO prescribes by right, and compared the 2. And what we have found is when you look at those kind of strategies that were employed on this building, by right, we could have a 20-story building that's a rectangle on this site, sitting on this corner. It could be 20, so it could be 8 stories taller, and albeit we could incorporate that step back at anywhere between the 3rd and the 8th floor, or 3rd and 7th floor. When we looked at that in the past, and we compared it to the building with these bent planes like this, we actually looked at that with a fellow named Roy Danoon, who is probably the premier wind tunnel engineer in the country. His company is CPP, Wind Engineers out in Colorado. And they've determined that this strategy really helps to mitigate to the point where, compared to a taller building with the step back, there's no degradation at the pedestrian comfort level on the street. And so we think, that helped us, with the strategy of coming up with something we want. We're looking for an iconic building, a building that has this sculptural drama that we have here, something that is going to, obviously, as you can tell, it's really important that it addresses a potential phase 2 in a meaningful way as well, but still holds up as a phase 1 only building. It works both ways, and that's the beauty of this design. So that's one thing. The other thing that was talked about was the transparency, and subsequent to the submittal of our application, we have been working with Viracon, who's the glass manufacturer and supplier, and an internationally known brand. Many of you as architects know who they are, and you've dealt with them. What we have actually determined, and they've looked into this now, and we just got word as of latest today. But basically, we have found out that we really don't necessarily have an issue, a technical issue that we need to ask for an alternate finding on. While the glass that we are submitted technically is only 76% transparent, which is 4% less than the prescribed 80 by the UDO, its reflectance is only 12%, which is 3% less than the prescribed UDO at 15%. So what Viracon has done is they've analyzed that, and they have said that the influence of a small percentage of reflectance has a greater impact on overall visual clearness of glass, the visual transparency, than a small percentage of the visible light that actually goes through the glass, which is what the measure of transparency is. So these are all technical terms. I know some of you understand that, but what Viracon has said is that the glass we've specified is actually just as transparent, maybe slightly more so from a visible light, from a visual transparency standpoint, because of its lower reflectance than what the UDO baseline is. And they actually went so far as to say they would put that in writing if that would be necessary. But so what I would say is, I think from a transparency standpoint, we're using very transparent glass. Most of you know the VE185 product. It's incredibly transparent. While the numbers that are published by Viracon aren't there as far as what matching up to what UDO says, the performance of them, according to Viracon, is actually just slightly better. And frankly, from the naked eye, you and I can't tell the difference. We just can't. It's from the prescription and versus reality. So that would be my argument to say that we're using transparent glass. But as far as alternative findings go, I would also say that the 3 alternate findings, we're doing all of those things anyway. We've got the rich materials, we've got the setback or the steps in the glass at the ground floor and the height and all that stuff. We're doing all those things, I think, architecturally to meet the intent of the UDO. So with that, I'll turn that over to whoever wants to go next and invite any questions you might have.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate your presentation. Are there any questions from the commission or the applicant? All right, being none, any other questions for staff? Okay. And I understand there's no one to speak from the general public, so I will go ahead and close this and open it up to commission members just to discuss your thoughts. I mean, personally, so we have 2 different things we're looking at. I think both of them, to me, are relatively straightforward and easy. I think it's a great looking, elegant building. I think, they did a very, very nice job. Not to overdo it, I think it's very well thought out, very well done. Like they said, I appreciate the comments about the Viracon glass, and it's, it is a you know one of the best products out there. So they're not trying to chimp out of it, in my opinion. So I think they've done a great job with both these aspects that they're asking for. But I just want to get your commission members' thoughts.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks for the presentation, Rob. Nice project. I think related to the glass, the transparency to me is not that big of a deal. I mean, I think the point that he made about the reflectance versus transparency is absolutely true. And even getting to 76% on a high performance IGU is a pretty good thing. So I have no issues with that. And then, as Corey said, I mean, I just think the design of it's really nice. I think the way they treated the base, the elements at the base, I think give it the intent of what we're looking for as far as step backs go. So I have no problem approving this project.
Agreed, Chris. And I like to be able to look at the renderings they brought today with the base, middle, top delineation there and study it as a consumer would. And indeed, they've met that eye gaze up. And so I do appreciate this new method of differentiation. And I agree, the project's beautiful. I'd be glad to approve this one.
Yep, I'm going to second what everyone else has said here. I think the intent is there on both parts, and really appreciate the level of detail that's here in front of us for us to be able to look at it.
Great. Without further ado, should we go ahead and look at the alternate findings? We have 3 of them. The approved alternate meets the intent of the transparency requirements. So this is for transparency, of course. You can read that, the intent of the transparency there on the screen. I believe it does. Let's skip number 2. Number 3, the street-facing building facade utilizes other architectural treatment to create visual interest and to offset the reduction in transparency. Again, we've discussed that, and I believe it does. So looking at number 2, the approved alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. If we could look at some policies to substantiate. LU 2.1, there's several. LU 2.1 is a good one.
UD 1.3.
1.3.
UD 1.2.
$7.4. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second that.
So what do you have, Chris or Will?
Sure. I think Will raised his hand.
Okay, Will. We'll go with Will on this one. So I was a first, Will a second. If you can turn your cameras on or let us know. I'm all in favor by raising your hand. Okay, any opposed? Being none, that is approved. Let's go ahead and look at our building massing. All right, so we have 5 findings here. The approved alternate meets the intent of the building massing regulations. There you go. The intent of the building massing regulations is to manage the impact of tall buildings located near public right-of-way. Step backs are intended to provide access to light and air, street level mitigation, wind impacts, produce a consistent street wall, and visually reduce the perceived scale. Again, I think, with the angle and everything, I think we're all in agreement.
Yeah, I think I'd actually like to commend that design team for engaging somebody to look at the wind and the wind tunnel effect for this project. As you can see, when phase 2 comes along, that could be a pretty big concern, especially with having, outdoor balconies for the conferencing space and things like that. So well done.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for that. Let's look at number 3. The approved alternate uses a change in building materials to mimic change in wall plane. The most substantial and durable materials are located at the bottom floor. Of course, we have those nice columns kind of a nice base at the bottom, window setback. If the approved alternate proposes a building setback behind sidewalk in lieu of a required step back, the resulting open space includes public amenities such as seating areas, trees, and landscaping, outdoor dining, which it does. Building contains architectural treatments for delineating the base, middle, and top of the building, which Jamie has alluded to earlier, which I agree as well. So back to the approved alternate meets the intent of the comprehensive plan. Can we substantiate that with some policies as well?
Policy UD 1.3, attractive facades.
UD 1.2, architectural features. LU 2.1, placemaking.
UD 2.4.
Okay. All right. With that being said, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Okay,
Second.
we have a first, and Jamie is a second. All right, all in favor? All right, any opposed? Being none opposed, they are approved. We appreciate it. Great project. We appreciate you bringing that in front of us today. All right, let's move right into AAD, case number 2, AAD 4-21. It's 3201 New Bern Avenue. We have, I believe, one participant, Marty Lynn, as the applicant today. And Lee, are you also presenting this one as well?
I am, yes.
All
Thank
right.
you, Chair. So 3201 New Bern Avenue is here for an alternate for vehicle parking lot landscaping. So the intent here is that the requirement is to maximize the to minimize the visual impact of large areas of vehicular parking as viewed from the public right-of-way and dissipate the effects of urban heat island. A well-designed parking lot utilizes landscape islands and clear delineations to break up the parking lot into smaller segments. Tree and shrub planting should not interfere with pedestrian circulation on the site. The applicant is proposing to redevelop a building and parking lot area for a future event center on a 6.41 acre site zoned commercial mixed use, 3 stories. Per the UDO standard, a landscape interior island must be provided every 10 parking spaces and be evenly distributed throughout the parking area. The northern half of this site is in the floodway, and according to the stormwater review, no new obstructions, including trees, may be placed in the floodway zone. The applicant is proposing an alternative design that places the required number of trees along the perimeter of the parking lot. The islands in the floodway will have low-level ground plantings to prevent erosion and provide aesthetic amenity. The findings to be met for this case are that the approved administrative alternate meets the intent of the vehicle parking lot regulations, that it conforms with comprehensive plan and adopted city plans, and that the approved alternate is considered equal to or better than the standard. Are there any questions for staff before we turn it over to the applicant?
All right, being none, let's go ahead and turn it over to Marty to present.
Hi, everyone. This is Marty Lynn, Blue Ceiling Design, 1249 Kildare Farm Road, Cary, North Carolina. As Lee said, this is a renovation of an existing building and site. This is the old Swain Steakhouse, or former Swain Steakhouse, for those of you who've been in Raleigh long enough to remember that. And it is for an event center, weddings and wedding receptions, those kinds of things. Our site, unfortunately, is pretty impacted by floodway. About half of the vehicular surface area is impacted by the floodway itself. And so, although we were able to solve the issues related to obstructions in the floodway with our lighting and with our waste and recycling, trees are a different story, obviously, because they need to be in the islands and for the code, and the islands need to be evenly distributed throughout the parking lot, as Lee said. So, have this problem of putting trees in a floodway where we're not allowed to have obstructions. So I'll reference the last plan in the set that was provided to all of you, which has the trees that would normally go in those islands shown in red, dashed red circles. And then you can see that we're proposing to relocate those trees to the edge of the parking lot, as shown by the circles that are not dashed, the thicker lined red circles. Those are where we're proposing to move the 8 trees that are impacted by the existing floodway. And as Lee said, also to respond to, having those trees come out of those islands, as we're proposing, we plan to put in a very low level ground cover, viney kind of ground cover. I think we submitted that we would consider something like a euonymus, a winter creeper type ground cover that will handle any potential erosion issues related to those islands, and also provide some aesthetic in terms of greenery to the parking lot. So with that, that's basically the gist of it.
Great, thank you, Marty. Any questions for the applicant from the commission?
Yeah, I just have one. Looks like the 4 plans south are pretty close together compared to the ones on the east.
Right.
Is there any reason why those are bunched closer versus maybe putting one of those 4 onto the east side and spreading them out a little more?
Sliding them to, saying the 4 that are grouped together, taking one of them and putting it where?
Just moving it over to the east where the other 4 are, so you'd have 5 on the east and 3 on the south. I'm going to defer to my landscape friends on the, the commission to tell me if that's better to have them a little space further apart than grouped together.
So the reason the ones are spread apart more so on that one side is because we're dealing with light poles, and we have to be 20 feet from the light poles. So we're having to create the separation to the light poles, and that's forcing us to push the trees farther apart. Makes sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, so is it Marty? I see that
Yes.
You really can't fit any more on the New Bern Avenue side. And I don't know if you can match the spacing on the Mill Burney Road side a little closer to what you've got on the New Bern Avenue, so it seems like a consistent row of trees. I assume they're all the same species.
They are all the same species. We can try to pull a tree maybe towards the building more. We have this retaining wall in there. We've got a pretty steep slope dropping from Mill Burney down to the site, as we do from New Bern as well. If you're familiar with the site, this thing's pretty much in a hole. But we can certainly try to move that one tree to the other end of the retaining wall if that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll spread those other ones out a little bit more.
You're probably not going to be able to move it much, but it's a good point.
I mean,
Chris comes up with.
I was going to say, I see what you're doing by trying to take the 8 trees that would have been in the islands anyways and put them on their edges, but would it be better to lose 1 and just do 7 and give them a little more space? Adam?
Yeah, or put one somewhere else along the Mill Burney Road if it's, I think, yeah, the one that's squeezed up against that retaining wall looks kind of out of place. I think the 3 on the Mill Burney Road side look too close to the curb, but generally in that area, maybe you could take one and put it on the other side of the entry drive or something.
Yeah, so I can definitely move the trees off the curb, create more separation there. What I was suggesting on that one tree that's behind the retaining wall right now, if we slid it left on the sheet towards the building to the end of the retaining wall in that triangular area between the end of the right of way and the curb line in there. Would you all be comfortable with that?
It certainly seems better. And if the spacing is closer to what's on New Bern, you could even move 2 over there. I don't know if they need to be within that right-of-way line. But,
are you suggesting putting them in the right-of-way or staying out of the right-of-way?
doesn't matter to me. I think we're just looking for consistent spacing, and that New Bern Avenue spacing really can't change. So getting closer to match that.
Okay. We can certainly explore that.
Nice.
If he's not allowed to put it in the right of way, Adam, I mean, would it be better just to lose one and get a little better spacing so they can grow a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so. If he's not allowed to put it right away, certainly. Yeah. There's two right-of-way lines on there. So there's one that goes straight and one that turns left, or that follows the red center line.
Yeah. we got some information from the surveyor that we have to get confirmation on.
Yeah. The only other thing I thought about with this is, I know you mentioned some ground covers, placing ground covers back in those planting islands, and because it's a floodway and it could flood and take plant material and their seeds downstream, it really seems like it would be nice to have native plants that couldn't spread invasively by seed or detached planting vegetation from floods.
Okay.
Like an evergreen carex or something, would make a good alternate to something like a euonymus.
Yeah, I was curious too if there is a restriction on what the height of the plant material in those islands can be. Like, could you have a low shrub, or does it have to be a ground cover?
Well, I don't know. We haven't tested that with stormwater. I am a little concerned that, which is why I think we put in our document contingent upon their review, because I don't know how they're going to respond to. They've been very particular about our pavement renovations. Basically, we cannot raise the pavement at all. So any renovation we do to the pavement we'll have to grind. Or do some kind of work where we're not raising the elevation of the pavement even, and we couldn't do raised curbs. So we're doing flush curbs. So I don't know how they're going to react to anything we put in those islands, but we were going to try.
I was also curious too. It looks like, just looking at the street view here, it looks like there's some pretty big pine trees along, I guess, just right behind where the 4 trees that we've been talking about.
There are.
Are those going to stay?
They are. There's room in there. It doesn't look like much room, but there's certainly room in there. And fortunately, the sun is going away from those pine trees instead of, behind them. So these trees will get good light.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a little bit out of my element. So the floodway, so is this entire site in the floodplain? Or is it?
No, the line that I've labeled the line that's floodway itself. Well, you said floodplain, right?
Floodplain, because floodway is the actual current, right, of the stream in the 100-year, and your floodplain would be the 100-year, right?
Right. So this other line, there's another line here that's just under the Milburnie Road label.
Yep.
That's the 2% thing or whatever,
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the floodplain.
Yeah.
So the whole site's almost the whole site's in the floodplain.
Right. Yes, I would question if they would allow them to put anything in those islands, but it would be nice to put something small in those islands if possible. But I'd question if they're going to allow them to do anything in there. Okay. Well, are there any other questions for applicant or for staff? Being none, I understand there's nobody to speak from the general public either on this one. So I'll go ahead and close this and open it up for discussion amongst the commission. I'll just open up and say, I'm not a landscape architect, but it looks like they've done pretty much what they can do. It's making it better than what it is now. I kind of, my thought is that, again, if I would rather see more of a consistent spacing. So I'd almost rather see a tree lost and have these spaced out a little bit better. Have 3 on that Milburnie kind of side. But leave that up to the professionals.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's going to be any magic in 8 versus 7 trees. It's just going to look contrived or incongruent. Yeah, I mean, it meets the intent of the code. To me, I mean, you're putting them out at the street facing to screen the big parking lot as much as you can. So I think it works.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, any other thoughts from commission? Being none, do I have anybody that would like to recommend approval or?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Adam. Have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Chair, I believe
we need to go through yes, we need to go through this line. Let's go through that really quick. So the approved administrative alternate meets the intent of the vehicle parking lot regulations. The approved alternate is considered equal to or better than the standard, which I believe it does. And then the approved administrative alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopt the city plan. So we need to substantiate this. So let's see what we can find here.
Yeah, UD 5.1, contextual design.
T 6.9.
That's 2. I think, does that work, Lee? We have 2.
Yeah, that works.
I think that's fine. Okay, so let's go back to we had a motion and a second. Are those motion change?
Did you want to condition the removal of that tree to create a consistent spacing along Milburnie?
Right. So Adam, does the yeah? So now that we've gone through these policies, have you changed your mind?
I think honestly, I think our feedback is probably enough. But if anybody feels like it's necessary to say get rid of it or space it out, I think whether he spaces it out or not, it meets the intent of the code.
Could we say that we would not require, just so staff kind of hears it from us, that it's not necessarily, we would not necessarily require that additional tree?
Yeah, at the discretion of the designer. 7 or 8 trees is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So we had the motion. Martha, you've seconded.
Yep.
All right. All in favor? Any opposed? Being none, it is approved. Okay. Now, if I'm correct, I believe that these next 2 cases will be together. Is that right? So we have cases AAD 5-21, 2201, and 2361 Casota Lane, as well as AAD 6-21, 5161 Kaiser Street. We're going to look at these together. We will discuss these together, but we will vote separately as it's all kind of one development. So that being said, I believe Charles is going to present this one. Charles?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Corey. So both of these cases are build-to alternates. So I'm going to read the definition and the intent here, and then I'll read each summary, and then the applicant will present them together. And like Corey said, we will have 2 separate votes. So this is UDO section 1.516 build to. The definition is 1, the build to is the area on the lot where a certain percentage that the front principal building facade must be located, measured as a minimum and maximum setback range from the edge of the proposed or existing right-of-way, whichever is greater. 2, the required percentage specifies the amount of the front building facade that must be located in the build-to, measured based on the width of the building divided by the width of the site or lot. B, the intent. The build-to is intended to provide a range for building placement that strengthens the street edge along the right-of-way, establishing a sense of enclosure by providing spatial definition adjacent to the street. 2, the building edge can be supplemented by architectural elements and certain tree plantings aligned in a formal rhythm. The harmonious placement of buildings to establish the street edge is the principal means by which the character of an area or district is defined. 3, the build-to range is established to accommodate some flexibility in specific site design while maintaining the established street edge. Of the general requirements, the first one applies to both of these cases. So on corner lots, a building facade must be placed within the build-to for the first 30 feet along the street extending from the block corner. So I'll first read the summary for the AAD 5. So here the applicant is proposing to develop a new phase for Old Town subdivision with 305 townhome lots and open space common area lots on a currently undeveloped parcel along the future extension of Casota Lane and Off Rock Quarry Road. The property is zoned residential 10 units per acre with conditions. Zoning conditions pertain to TCZ 419, which amended the conditions associated with the zoning case Z718, which pertain to the Old Town subdivision. Zoning conditions apply an overall unit limit for the Old Town subdivision and require new greenway trails to be built. This phase of development provides connectivity to proposed greenways in different phases of the project. The townhome build-to is 10 feet and 55 feet, 70% of which must be occupied by building width. The corner build-to requirement, the building be placed in the first 30 feet above the build-to from along the street extending from the block corner applies to each of the 4 build-to areas proposed for this alternate. These areas are highlighted in orange in the attached site plan, so that's true for both of them. Each of the 10 identified areas proposed for an alternate fails to meet the 30-foot corner requirement, while all but one of the townhouse block faces fails to meet the 70% requirement for the build-to. The proposal cumulatively provides a 51% build-to occupation for the buildings only. As an alternate design, the applicant proposes a network of 6 common open spaces and 4 landscape easements, in addition to an internal mid-block path at the north end of this phase that provides additional connectivity to the overall development network of sidewalks and paths. The proposal calls for a diversity of planting types, benches, waste receptacles, and paths in common open spaces. The landscape easements are proposed to have foundational plantings with a diversity of planting types. So I'll next read the summary for the next case. So here the applicant is proposing to develop a new phase for Old Town subdivision, 206 townhouse lots and open space common area lots on currently undeveloped parcel along the future extension of Kaiser Street off Rock Quarry Road. The same zoning conditions of the previous case apply to this one, and the greenways mentioned in the previous development phase are connected to via paths in this project here. The townhome build-to is 10 and 55 feet, 70% of which must be occupied by building width. The corner build-to requirement, the building be placed in the first 30 feet of the build-to from along the street, extending from the block corner, applies to each of the 4 build-to areas proposed for this alternate. Actually, it's 10 corner areas for this one, and they are highlighted in orange for the site plan. Each of the 10 areas proposed for an alternate fails to meet the 30-foot corner requirement, while all but one of the townhouse block faces do meet the 70% requirement for the build-to. The block face that does not meet the build-to covered requirement is occupied at 50%, and again, that's the buildings only. As an alternate design, the applicant proposes a network of 9 common open spaces and 1 landscape easement, in addition to an internal east-west mid-block path that provides additional connectivity to the overall development network of sidewalks and paths. The proposal calls for a diversity of planting types, benches, waste receptacles, and paths in the common open spaces. The landscape easements proposed to have foundational plantings with a diversity of planting types. Happy to take any questions if you have them for staff.
Any questions for staff from the commission? Can you go ahead and, Charles, maybe just show us a quick site plan of the two?
Sure.
So we can
Let me just say here that you might recall a case from last year for the northern portion of this development, and that portion did include that mid-block path there. So these are two other additional phases of this project. And so that greenway, as you can see, does eventually connect via sidewalks and other paths to form a network within the entire development.
Great, thank you, Charles. Any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? Okay, we have, looks like three applicants, Laura Good, Michael Vamprin, and Sarah Donahoe. I don't know which one has signed up to speak first, so I'll just turn it on over. I'll let you present.
Good afternoon, Chair Bates. This is Laura Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Laura Good with Parker Poe. My business address is 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1400, Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Today I'm joined by Eric Rifkin, who is here on behalf of the property owner, as well as Michael Vamprin and Sarah Donahoe with McAdams. I'll briefly introduce the project and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Vamprin, who will describe the site layout and the details of the request, and then our team will be available for any questions you may have. As you mentioned earlier, we are presenting both requests at the same time, but we will outline the specifics for each individual case separately. And we are, if you can see on the screen right now on this slide, the two townhome phases that we are discussing today are shown in blue on the screen on either side of Casota Lane. And as Charles mentioned, these cases involve the same request for build to and corner lot building placement that we made for another townhome phase within the same Old Town development back in August of 2020. That was case AAD-15-2020, which this commission approved unanimously. And that portion is shown in yellow, highlighted in yellow, labeled Pod 1 up at the north end of the development. So today we will show how we are using the same approach for these cases to create meaningful integrated open spaces. And approval of these design alternate requests will allow for consistent and cohesive design with integrated open space throughout the Old Town development. Next slide, please. So we'll give a brief project summary, then we'll go over the required findings, and then we will explain our proposed alternates. Next slide, please. So these cases, again, focus on two townhome portions of the overall Old Town development. The first for lots 4 and 5, which is case AAD-5-21, involves about 305 townhomes on 49 acres along Casota Lane, which is one of the main roads that runs through the Old Town development. Now, what you're seeing here, this slide here, for perspective, it's rotated 90 degrees. So the roundabout that is shown at the left side of the screen there, that's actually north, and then the far right is to the south. So it's just to orient you there, it is turned 90 degrees to the west, I guess. Next slide, please. The second case, AAD-6-21 for lot 10, involves about 306 townhomes on 35.7 acres, which is along the other side of Casota Lane from the first case, and also has some frontage along Kaiser Street. So overall, a significant part of the project, both in area and design, consists of open space. And the overall open space framework focuses on meaningful open space and outdoor spaces, both in quality and in quantity. However, as we worked on placing the townhomes, we found we could not meet the build-to requirements and the street layout requirements of the UDO, and needed to address the intent of these sections in other ways. So accordingly, we are seeking relief from the build-to requirements of UDO sections 1.5.6 and 2.2.3.E2 to reduce the required 70% building width in the primary build-to, and from 1.5.6.C.1 to remove the requirement to anchor a building within the first 30 feet of a block corner. And at this time, I'd like to have Mr. Vamprin speak on how we are addressing each of the required findings and to discuss our proposed alternates in more detail.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Michael Van Pran. I'll just take a quick opportunity to talk through some of the townhouse products that we're showing here and kind of set the stage for the overall character. So Kasota is the primary north-south movement there, and we're actually proposing rear-loaded townhomes along that main drive, both for lots 4 and 5 and for lots 10. And so the idea is to try and build some type of community approach as you go there and not have driveways right along the road. So we have rear-loaded townhomes, and then kind of internal to both sites, we have 2 other types. It's a traditional front-loaded townhouse, and then something that we're collectively referring to as campus-style townhomes, which actually have on-street surface spaces, and you walk up to your townhouse unit. So the idea of big picture is to have multiple different townhouse and product types for different levels of entry-level approaches. So next slide, please. So the idea behind us not meeting the corner lot build-to standards stems from 2 primary things, and it's that we're required to have 20 foot of separation from a driveway to the point of tangency of a right-of-way. And so sometimes we're able to put the driveway on, we're required to put the a certain distance away. And so when we aren't able to place that driveway closer than 20 feet, we're not physically able to put that building within the first 30 feet. For some of the product types where we do have that rear-loaded product type, we are able to actually meet that standard. And so kind of in the following slides, you'll see where we are able to meet some and we aren't able to meet some. It kind of stems from those different townhouse types. So there's that general requirement. And in some areas, we simply wanted more open space adjacent to those road intersections. So next slide, please. We believe we meet several of the comprehensive plan statements: placemaking, corridor development, activating the street, neighborhood connectivity, overall pedestrian networks. And so our solution is where a private lot from a townhouse directly abuts the intersection of a right-of-way, we're proposing landscape easements in that place. Where we don't have a public, where we do have public space rather, and we're proposing just kind of common open space or outdoor amenity area. So where we are able to provide outdoor amenity area, we are, where we're not, we're doing landscape. So they'll make a little more sense in the next few slides. So next slide, please. So the change in percentage of the building occupies the build-to area. We believe that we're substantially meeting the intent of the building requirements. And through the outdoor amenity area and the landscape easements, we believe we're satisfying that. Next slide, please. So, okay, we'll get to the meat of it. And so the yellow, what you see there, is where we have, in short, private lots that abut the 2 intersections of public streets. So those yellow areas that are for lots 4 and 5, that's where we're proposing landscape easements in between the building face and the public right-of-way. And you'll see that what we're proposing down the road. And then in blue is where we're actually able to provide that common open space or the outdoor amenity area. So kind of 2 different typologies that we're proposing to meet that corner lot building placement. So in general, there's 10 areas that we've identified, or 14 rather, that aren't able to meet it. So next slide, please. So going to lot 10, there are 10 areas that aren't able to meet it here. And again, you'll see on the left side of the screen the 1 yellow dot that represents where we're proposing the landscape easement. And then the other areas, kind of I mentioned, when you have, from a topographic standpoint, you always put your driveway on the high side of the slope. And so where we are able to slide that driveway kind of to one side or the other, we are actually able to anchor a lot of those townhouse units at the intersection. And the one on the left is where we aren't able to. And the areas in blue are kind of 3 different areas. It's near the roundabouts, and then it's kind of along some internal drives where those campus-style townhomes are located, where we have parking in between the building and the right-of-way. So kind of 3 different types of where we are, and so we kind of develop solutions to address that in each particular case. So next slide, please. So we'll move along to the build-to requirements and what we're showing here. And so I'll kind of start south or page right, if you will, we proposed apartments adjacent to it. So we felt it was more appropriate to have more building spacing between these townhouse units, flanking those apartment units, to provide a little more of a compatible building relationship there. And so you kind of see that 69% there is very close to the 70%. And if you kind of go page left near the roundabout, you kind of see a 51 and 55% built to. It would be closer to that 69, 65%. If you note, right at the roundabout, we are proposing a connecting trail, and that's what's kind of watering that built to. So all along Kasota Lane, again, those are those rear-loaded townhomes. So as you're driving in, we pulled all the driveways off of that road and kind of tucked them behind the building. So the idea is to have a lot of open space, both between the townhouse units and between the townhouse units and the public street, to kind of mirror what's going on with the apartments, kind of page south. Once you kind of walk internal to the site, you kind of move to the front-loaded townhouse units in small C, but it's Street A there. And so you have around a 64 to a 65% build-to standard for those. And that's really stemming from the idea of embedding more open space between these townhouse units. What that shakes out to is about 30 to a 40-foot building separation. So in lieu of adding in more townhouse units in this context, we've opted to provide more building separation and more open space between these townhouse units. That's kind of why you're hovering around that 65%, which we feel is more appropriate for this context than necessarily hitting the 70% build-to requirement. And then as you move kind of page north, those are the campus-style townhomes. And so those were, again, where you have the parking separating it from the building in the right-of-way, and you're kind of hovering around that 60% build-to standard. Those have closer to a 25 to 30% building separation, but just given the curvilinear road network, we weren't able to hit the 70% for those areas. And then all the way to the page left, you have, again, those rear-loaded townhomes where we are able to have a closer building separation and have that rear-loaded product to have a higher built-to percentage. But again, we felt it was more appropriate, given this context, to kind of embed open space than necessarily force more townhouse units into these areas. So next slide, please. So we're going to go to lot 10 to the west. And generally, we are hitting the build-to requirements in all these areas. Again, kind of starting from page right, those are the rear-loaded townhomes where we don't necessarily have a lot of the curvilinear road networks and the roundabouts and the trails that are bisecting the area, and we are able to hit that 70% build-to standard. The one area that we aren't able to hit it for this area is all the way to the page south, and that's where we abut an existing lake. The lake, and we'll show you that in a second, is about 3.5 acres. And so we're trying to have a more intentional connection to that lake via walking trails. That's also where the mail CBU is located. So the idea is that that's where you'd come and get your mail. And in theory, you'd be able to walk there through all the trails. So that's the one area for lot 10 that we aren't hitting the build to. And it's about 50% of the frontage of that public street. So next slide, please. So I'll walk into our proposed alternates now, and I'll start from page north there. And as Laura went into a little bit, this is kind of a very similar request. So along Anamosa Street, during the rezoning for this property, we worked with the city of Raleigh to best understand what the connectivity is to Walnut Creek Greenway ultimately. And so the idea was not to put it necessarily in the floodplain, it was to put it along the street. And so we have a 12-foot multi-use trail that walks along Anamosa Street, and ultimately it's going to extend plan east out to Barwell, out to Barwell. So ultimately connect down and then connect down to the school down there ultimately. So you have this 12-foot multi-use City of Raleigh Greenway trail extending along the public street. And so walking down from that northern roundabout, we were proposing a 10-foot wide multi-use trail on the street. So kind of for lots 10 there, you have these, you know, this build 2% is being met, but you front this 10-foot wide multi-use trail. And so it kind of walks down to the central roundabout and then walks into lots 4 and 5. And so kind of that larger dashed line is 10-foot wide multi-use trail that we're proposing internal to the site. So we're proposing connectivity internal to the site via this 10-foot wide path, and it walks through both along the road and through some of the open spaces that we're proposing. So we're trying to connect people via these open spaces with this much larger pedestrian connections. And so for lot 10 to the west, we are proposing a smaller 8-foot wide trail that walks in between the townhouse units that connects to the trail on Soda Lane and also connects to the trail around that existing lake. So we're trying to intentionally make these connections and embed open space within the development. So next slide, please. So we'll zoom into more of a site-specific solution. And so this is for lots 4 and 5, where we weren't meeting the majority of the corner lot building placement standards. Again, where we are abutting the lot to the public right-of-way, we're simply proposing a landscape easement with foundational landscaping that softens that building wall and helps make that transition between the right-of-way and the building. In some of these larger areas, we're proposing a different solution to help create more of an experience as you kind of drive into these sites. So along Breco Way there, we are proposing to enhance the roundabout with some understory trees and native grasses to provide that visual focal point. There, kind of page right, we're proposing kind of some passive walking trails, a passive pocket park, if you will, that does have trash receptacles and benches. We are proposing additional screening to that parking lot that's being proposed there. You can see that's where the male CBU is located. So you kind of drive in and go to the CBU there, and you have an opportunity to kind of stop. And we are proposing additional screening for that parking area, you know, noting that is where a building would be, we're putting a parking lot in a CBU. So we are proposing that passive park, screening of the CBU and the parking lot. And then along that area, we're proposing foundation landscaping again. So kind of big picture, those areas that are in yellow, we're proposing this foundation landscaping and then kind of trying to create an entry experience as you walk into the site. So next we'll go to lot 10, please. So this is all the way up in the north, adjacent to the primary clubhouse. There's the 10-foot use trail that kind of walks through it and would cross to the north and ultimately kind of connect to the city of Raleigh on Street Greenway Trail. So in this area, we are again kind of proposing to enhance the roundabout. I think we're putting in a 4-inch, 12-foot tree there at the center, and then we're proposing again some turf and then some ornamental grasses and shrubs within that area. For the corner lot building placement, we are doing kind of a passive approach, a passive pocket park, where we're proposing, you know, kind of meandering walking trails, benches, trash receptacles. And then one of the cool things about this is that there is an abundance of natural stone on site, hence the name Rock Quarry Road. And so throughout this process, while we've been installing the roads, we've actually been pulling up a lot of boulders out there, and we've been trying to arrange them at these intersections. So we're using this natural stone found on site and kind of tucking it into these kind of landscape areas. And so that's how we're kind of addressing this corner lot, is through kind of, again, this kind of passive park opportunity. It connects to the larger active recreational opportunities. To the north is the main clubhouse, and to the south you have the dog park and some more passive opportunities. And so that's how we're addressing the corner lot in this particular instance. So next slide, please. And this zooms down further into lot 10. This is kind of zooms in on the 8-foot wide trail that kind of walks between the townhouse units. So you'd be able to kind of walk out your back door, hop onto the trail, and then go onto this much larger trail system or go down to the pond. But in this particular area, we are proposing some additional hardscape spaces. So we kind of have a little pedestrian node there along the trail, and we're proposing benches, again, native trees and understory grasses and shrubs. So we feel like we're proposing appropriate landscape easements with the foundational plant material. So again, where we aren't able to anchor the building at the intersection, we're proposing this landscaping to help soften the edge. And then a much larger view, I feel like we're addressing the corner lot building placement standards by these passive parks or these kind of pedestrian nodes. So I believe that's it. If you go to the next slide. Yep. So thank you, and we're all open for questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Any questions from the commission for the applicants? Any other questions for staff while we're here? Being none, I understand there's nobody from the general public to speak on this one as well, so I'll go ahead and close it and open it up for discussion between the commission members.
I'd just like to say I really appreciate the thorough presentation, lots of details, explanation, and really getting at how what they're doing meets the intent of the code. And, you know, this is really similar to the one that we approved earlier on, as stated previously. So.
Yeah, I would agree with those comments, and you know, add that they've got some hardship between, you know, driveways and intersections that they're dealing with that I think have been addressed really nicely with the landscaping easements. And I do think it's consistent with the previous case last year that we approved. And honestly, I would prefer to see more spacing between the townhouses than have that 70% frontage that we've got in the code. So I like having more space between them as well.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
No, I appreciate that. I think maybe that is something that maybe we need to take up as a commission, is, you know, discussing that, and if that's something that we need to, discuss further, because this has come up quite a few times.
And Corey, I think it has to deal with attached housing, so I'd like to mill through that with you a little bit too. But
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. I think
next design committee meeting.
There you go. Exactly. Well, I think, you know, I think they've done a fantastic job for you know, the layout, and, you know, it doesn't necessarily meet the code, but I think it definitely meets the intent of what we're trying to accomplish here. So I think
I'd like to commend also the integration of the total project. The way the pieces are coming together, we've seen both of them now. It's a very well thought design, and I appreciate it for the folks that will then be occupants in the space, because a lot of detail has been given to community and natural open areas. So I thank you for doing that by way of design.
Should we look at the findings?
Let's look at the findings. Let's look at the if we could pull up the here we go. The approved alternate meets the intent of the build to regulations. I believe it does. The approved alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan. We can look at that in a minute. The approved alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character defining street wall or established build to pattern. Is not harmonious. It's quite the opposite. The change of percentage of building that occupies the build to area or increased setback does not negatively impact pedestrian. Again, I think it helps. And the site area that would have otherwise been occupied by buildings converted to outdoor amenity, which I believe it does. So let's look at some findings to substantiate. Again, LU 2.1, placemaking, UD 5.4.
UD 2.3.
Mm-hmm.
UD 5.4.
Mm-hmm.
All of them. I'm just kidding.
Okay, and I'm looking at these policies, unless you guys want to break these out separately. I'm looking at these policies for both projects, but we'll vote separately if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's good. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay. We have a motion from Adam,
I'll
second from Jamie. Was Jamie, were you raising your hand? Did I see?
Either of us, yes.
We'll go with Jamie. So we have a second with Jamie. All in favor for, we're looking at A85-21, so it's 2201 and 2361 Casota Lane. All in favor, say, raise your hand. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, let's look at the second one, which is AAD 6-21, 5161 Kaiser Road. We need to make a motion for that one as well, I believe. I will motion to approve. We have a second.
And we just said that it's the same policies as the last one.
It is, yeah, right.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have
Chris.
a motion and a second. Chris, all in favor? Raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, unanimous. All right. Thank you very much. So that should, let me look through here. That approves that case. That, now I'll say thank you. Now that ends the business portion of our meeting, and we will continue with working group reports and other business. Okay, so let's, the working group, how about committee reports for the design committee? Let's start with the relatively new design committee. Charles, would you like to start with that?
Sure. We met recently and continued the discussion about ways that the design committee can get more involved in different processes within the city. And so the committee discussed getting more involved in text changes, and we talked a bit about what that might look like. It is fairly open-ended, and I think eventually up to the committee and city management as to how that might work, and council. But it could be, the committee operates as a sort of generator of ideas for design-based text changes to the code. So you were just speaking about the townhouse issue. So that might be one, for example, and it would give you an opportunity to plug into some of the text amendment processes that happen today. We also talked at length about the area and corridor planning process and how the design committee can get involved in that. And the idea there is that the committee or a group of the Parents Commission could essentially develop touch points within the planning process to participate in design workshops. I think what it might entail is, the committee sits down with city staff and maybe the consultant to essentially do a charrette on the plan that's being worked on. And probably do that once or twice throughout a typical one-year planning process. And so all total, given the amount of planning projects that we have in our office right now, it would be probably anywhere from 4 to 8 design workshops and charrettes. We are going to sort of unofficially test this out with the Dick's Edge project that is going on right now. So we're not officially getting involved in that project. We just want to use Dick's Edge right now as sort of test case to see what it might look like if the design committee meets with staff and sort of hash out some of these ideas. Ultimately, that engagement would ideally produce some design concepts or principles that the design committee develops, and then those are transmitted to the project managers for those and hopefully included in the larger planning process. If anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to take them. The pattern book issue, it does, obviously this is a much more sort of long game approach, and so that's not, we're not completely sort of abandoning that, but I think that in the short term, getting more involved in text changes and border studies and area studies is probably the most fruitful.
Thank you, Charles. Candace, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I will say really quickly before you do, Candace, is that, really we have some exciting opportunities here as a commission to define what we want to be moving forward, other than looking kind of, as we're morphing into the kind of this new realm of quasi-judicial. And this is some exciting opportunities. And I would just like to encourage more people to kind of get involved in this committee. I think there's been, 3 or 4 people, but it'd be great to really, see some, because I think there could be some branches off of this committee maybe that tackles some more of these, but it'd be good to get more thoughts and input. I'd love to see more participation if possible. So that's all I'm going to say. And Candace, if you have anything to add. You're on mute.
You're muted.
I'm sorry about that. But I just want to second what Corey said and just add on a little bit to what Charles said. This approach is really us trying to get involved earlier in the design phase rather than looking at the high impact, high visibility, what we had talked about earlier and last year. The quasi-judicial status just really kind of throws a wrench into that, and we didn't want to mess anything up with that. And so just please, if you're interested, the small group of us really looked hard at what we thought the committee could handle. So I don't think it'll be a huge commitment for people. If you're interested in getting involved early in the design process and really giving ideas to project teams, I think this is going to be a really great opportunity for that. And the city has a lot of exciting kind of planning projects coming down the pipe. And so I think that this is just going to be the first of the first of many opportunities. And so please, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a shout, or Corey or Charles, and we can certainly talk with you more. But I would love for people to really take advantage and try this out with us. This is new for all of us, so we're all going to be kind of in a testing phase. So we'd love to have some more involvement.
Yeah, I'll add to those comments. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for all of us, and I would encourage all of us to participate and really get jazzed about this. This is one of, only a few areas around the city that I think are, transforming so quick, and this is our chance to have a real impact on it. And there's so much going on right now at the Dix Edge and the Dix Park study. I personally can't think of a more exciting project to look at right now with this group and have the impact that we've been trying to have on projects that we've been talking about trying to have the impact on for projects. So let's put a good foot forward and hope this goes well and we get involved in projects like this moving forward.
Thank you all for that. Yeah, it's fantastic. Just to think that we can look back 20 years from now and say we had a opportunity and we took it and we made the Raleigh a better place because of that. So this is our opportunity. So let's move on to annual retreat follow-up, Jamboard stuff. Lee.
Yes, so at our next meeting, I'll have a summary ready for you all to review, talking about what we went over during the retreat on February 4th. But in general, we got some really great feedback, and I really appreciated the conversation that we all were able to have during that time. And to continue that conversation, the Jamboard is still up and live, and I'm going to keep it up until Tuesday. That's the 23rd. So if you can all make sure you have your comments up by then, I'm going to take all of those and summarize them as well for you at our next meeting.
Great. That's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate everybody making it to the retreat. That was good times. And I think You know, when you start planning these, you think, how are we going to fill up this time? And we got through like half of our stuff. So, I mean, there's so much more we can talk about, but I appreciate everybody's hanging in there and spending their time. Any other questions or comments from the commission before we go through the minutes and wrap up?
Just in this vein update, there was a focus group for the public art plan earlier this week, and just happened that there were 3 appearance commissioners on that. So just to the value of weighing in on stuff like that, there's definitely a value and a need there.
I had a specific building project. I don't want to dwell on too much, but I was just curious about. I saw that the building that Goodnight's Comedy Club is in right now is slated for demolition, which really kind of caught me off guard because I guess thought that maybe was protected from some sort of historic preservation angle. I was just curious if y'all had heard anything about that, or it reminds me of kind of trying to get out of stuff like that with like the Velvet Cloak, which kind of spurred the high impact, high visibility study. It just seemed like a similar situation to me.
I could take this unless Lee or Charles, you have a little more direct experience with it. This was the subject, this property, the subject of a zoning case, I want to say about 10 years ago, following the project that was right there on Hillsborough and Morgan. Kind of the properties to the south kind of wanted to do the same thing and kind of go along with maybe some future development, irregardless. Was part of it, and the properties to the south, and they came up with zoning conditions. These kind of came out of the West Morgan Street small area plan that had been done a few years before that, and the conditions were approved as part of a streetscape plan under our old code. It just kind of sat there. I think folks were doing it kind of speculatively, but in recent years, the owner of the property or whoever had it under contract asked for changes to the street plan in the area, which initially Morgan Street, instead of the curve, it would be a T, with the Morgan Street kind of extending over to towards I'm blanking the name of it right now. Ash Avenue. Yeah, thank you. But that was recently removed from the street plan, and there was I don't think anybody, our staff was in the pre-submittal meetings, but I was recently in a meeting where they talked about the interpretation of the kind of height conditions that were set out by the condition. So I don't think I've heard of any discussion about saving the building. I'm not sure if it was landmarked. I don't think it was. But if Lee or Charles, you have any more information about that. Nothing has been submitted in terms of the plan itself or site plan, but we do kind of have it on, just popping on our radar right now, and it's looking to be more of a mainly multifamily with some retail component. I think along the street edges.
What's the height on that?
The height? That was the part of the conditions is it's a 7-story, but there's a step back that's required, kind of like a wedding cake or angle that's required as part of these that come off Morgan. So it kind of goes up that way. But there is some question as with the street alignment and if there's some abandonment of right of way, how that's measured. I'm not sure that's quite figured out yet, but we'd be happy to report back when we know more, or there's been a plan submitted. But I don't know if Lee or Charles any more information.
No, I was going to say we do have Erin Morton here, one of our historic preservation folks. I don't know if she's got anything to add.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, I was just commenting that we received a call about this prior to purchase, I assume, to see about any overlays, and there are no historic overlays on that property, and really not many in that general neighborhood. There are a couple of landmarks, the Grosvenor Gardens apartments, the Boylan apartments, and the John W. Thompson house, which is right at the corner of Morgan and Hillsborough at that roundabout. But this area is largely devoid of any kind of historic overlays, unfortunately.
That was a good question though, Martha. And I think my understanding is that, that they're not planning to keep it, and that what they are going to put there will have a pretty good amount of retail and some mixed use, some housing as well. But I was wondering, because I knew that there was a road that had been planned and it was going to kind of go through and hit Ash, where kind of those single room houses, I don't know if they're houses or apartments are right now. So I'm glad to hear that kind of that's been abandoned, that idea. But good. Are there any other thoughts?
I was just going to share that the big hotel on Capitol Boulevard is being demolished. Thank goodness.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, it's been an eyesore for a while, long while. And that is our project. That project came before us not too long ago, right? So great job at the commission. There's a lot of exciting things happening in the city, and I know Chris is involved in one over off Blue Ridge. That whole Blue Ridge corridor is going to be blown up, so it's going to be interesting to see. Chad Parker is working on another big project over there off Edwards Mill, so that whole corridor there is going to be changing. So it's nice to see. I mean, there's some exciting things happening around the city. All right. Is everybody? I was stalling so everybody could read the minutes. I probably should have said that ahead of time. I'm sure everybody has read them. So.
Well, I might help you stall for a minute longer, Chair. One more thing I wanted to add is that, believe it or not, we may be starting the process to plan this year's Sir Walter Raleigh Awards fairly soon. So I'll be looking for committee members who want to hop on board for that. Jury's out if it's going to be in person or remote, but my money's on a remote ceremony once again. So I think it'll be a bit smoother this time around, though.
Thank you for putting the minutes up. They're a little small, but for my old eyes, but there we go. If everybody's read them, and if there is a motion to approve or not.
So moved.
All right. Well, we have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. If there's no other business, last chance, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. I appreciate everybody spending their time through these cases tonight. I think it was great.
I have a random request.
Yep, go ahead, Jamie.
Variety of people. This has nothing to do with the commission. I have a unicorn that I'm hunting for. I need it mixed use, probably an old bed and breakfast, minimum 10 bedrooms, does not have to have a price tag. So if anybody knows anybody that has one of those within 90 minutes of the airport, they might want to unload, please call me. Thank you very much. Yeah, good times.
Great. I'd like to have one of those.
Right, but not without a price tag. I mean, some of these scare me. They've got lots of zeros in them and commas and things. But yeah,
my price tag is it's much different.
I like to keep it at 1 comma.
That's right.
Thank you, guys.
All right, y'all. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, guys. Thank you to staff too. Good night.
Everybody, Lee, thanks for the connection for the week.
Absolutely.